characteristically, through the ages, been the attitude of priesthoods, of the guardians of law and order, or as they say in the Episcopal Church, everything should be done decently and in order. The guardians of this kind of thing have always been afraid of the spontaneous manifestations of the Spirit. And not only of things like mysticism, but also of things like falling in love. They are very, very dangerous happenings. And so here is an absolutely astounding paradox comes about. And it goes like this. We know on the one hand that human love is only genuine when it is felt in the depths of the heart. And we know that this is true whether it be the love of man or whether it be the love of God. We are always looking for the genuine article, you see. We don't want someone to love us because they're forcing it. We want them to love us because they really do in their heart. Now you see, when you go back to the study of the history of the Hebrew religion underlying the history of Christianity, you will find this problem in this way, that you've got two traditions constantly compensating one against the other, playing each other off in the history of the Hebrew religion. The priestly tradition and the prophetic tradition. The priesthood is always concerned with the external observance of the laws. But the prophetic tradition is always concerned with, do you really mean what you do? They constantly condemn as a hypocrite. And you see, in this sense, Jesus is the greatest of the prophets. They constantly condemn as a hypocrite the person who obeys the law without meaning it. Maybe this man does not commit adultery, but the prophet says, if he has looked at a woman to lust after her, he has already committed adultery in his heart. So that if you really obey the law, you obey it with your feelings and not just outwardly. For as Jeremiah says, the day will come when no man shall any more say to his brother, know God, that is to say, know the law of God, but they shall all know me. For I will write my law in their inward parts. The ideal, in other words, is people who do not simply obey and do the right things, but who want to do the right things, whose desires are transformed. For the heart, to write the law in the heart means to change one's desire. So you see, what this comes to then is a peculiarly paradoxical situation, that you are required by law to be completely honest. And more than that, you are required by law to be loving, and honestly loving. You must love God and love your neighbor honestly, not forcing it, not pretending to it, not being a hypocrite. You must really feel it. Now that, you see, is where the astonishing conflict occurs between the mystic and the moralist. For the moralist knows that he has to be more than a legalist. He has to be more than one who insists that the outward observance of the law be kept to. Luther said that the law which requires that inward compliance is the most terrible thing. He based a great deal of his philosophy on an attack on the idea that one's own inner feeling could be commanded. Because you see, the moment you subscribe to the idea that your inner feeling should be commanded, you let yourself in completely for hypocrisy. If, you see, you tell another person that you love them because you know you're supposed to love them, and in fact in your heart you don't love them, you're a liar. And therefore, the more you insist on that lie, the more you feel it's your duty to make your feelings over and to love that other person, the more you get yourself deeper and deeper and deeper into trouble. Because here, if anywhere, the truth will out. You will not be able to sustain the pretense. You will not have sufficient energy to go on pretending and making a kind of mock of the feeling of love. And you have at last, then, if you're honest, to say, I don't. It doesn't matter whether this is to some other human being or whether in a religious situation you have to sit back and look at the Lord and say, Lord, I don't love you. I think you're a bore. You're demanding, you're authoritarian, you're domineering. And probably I ought to love you, but I'm sorry I don't. Now, we think, you see, that an honest expression of our feelings would be disruptive of law and order. It wouldn't. Not in the least. Actually, it would be contributive to it. Because if I say to somebody, look, I'm not doing this for you because I love you or because I like you. I'm doing it for you because the book says I must. Now that puts it up to the other person, who has to look within himself and say, honestly, ought I to accept this favor from this person? Or ought I to go about seeing how I could provide myself with these conveniences? He may say, I understand you don't like doing this, but excuse me, I'm in a terrible jam, and I will be most beholden to you if for a little while yet you will go against your feelings and help me out. See, that's a nice way of doing things. That's the kind of real understanding that we have to have. I was associated once with somebody in a business way who was a complicated person who pretended always that he was a great idealist and that he was doing whatever he did for the benefit of mankind, for the furtherance of mutual understanding, for unselfishness and love between human beings. But actually his dealings were ethically of a very shady character. And I couldn't get on with him because he wouldn't come clean. If he had said, look, I'm in a kind of a jam, and in order to get around this problem, we have to manipulate things thus and so, and I know this isn't very ethical, but that's what we have to do. I would have said, well, I'm entirely in agreement with you. But then he wouldn't have come on with this sort of pious line that was so sickening and offensive. He would have come on in a human way, and we would have understood each other. You see now how real honesty is a genuine basis of morals. Real honesty is always not pretending that your feelings are other than they are. We know, as we deal with situations practically, that we may have to do things that go against our feelings. And it's the same with helping people when you have to, whom you don't like, you don't want to help, but on the whole it's rather necessary to do so. But don't ever be dishonest in playing that your feelings are not what they are. The yoga of egocentricity. Now this is a very difficult yoga for many people to follow, because we've been brought up so as not to have the courage of our convictions about it. To be a consistent egotist, perhaps Nietzsche was a great exemplar of this philosophy. To be a consistent egotist requires tremendous nerve, because everybody is trying to put you down and say to you, you should be unselfish. You should cooperate with us. And that requires doing things that you may not like to do, but it is for the common good that you should do these things. But the difficulty about all this is, I'm talking at a quite superficial level of this descent. I'm talking about here. When people pretend to be unselfish and cooperative, they confuse others horribly. If you give somebody else the impression that you're going to be their loyal friend and you're going to really knock yourself out for them, and they rely on you to do that, and then you let them down because that wasn't really what you meant to do, you create a great deal of trouble. So in marriage, if you vow to be faithful and constant to some girl in a moment of intense passion, and then after a while your affections cool off, and you've led her to believe that you will always be reliable and faithful, there's an awful crash coming. So it's terribly important to be emotionally honest. It's very difficult because we don't always know what our emotions are. But to say to someone that I will love you forever and ever is a very, very serious dishonesty and deception. So in the same way, to give the impression to all those around you in your society, your community, that you will put the community before yourself and can be relied upon to do this, is a dangerous thing to do. You may have the fullest intention of carrying this out, but I find in practical relationships that I am much more comfortable with people who tell me frankly what their feelings are. In other words, if I'm not welcome because they've got other business to do and they're all tied up with things, it's much better that a person should say, I'm sorry, but I don't feel inclined to see anybody right now. I'm busy and so on. Then I can rely upon that person that when they tell me you are welcome, that I really am. One of my best friends is a woman who is totally frank. And if she, even if for purely irrational reasons, she doesn't want to come along with something or do something, she just says, I don't feel like it. And so we understand each other perfectly. Everybody understands her. Because then they know when she says, please come, that she really means it. So, a proper egocentricity, if you feel like an ego, you see, is essential for good human relations. And to be guided by your real wishes as far as you can make them out and know what they are, is on the whole a safer bet in human relations than to be guided by abstract principles. Now, the abstract principles are all very well, and we should know what an ideal pattern of human behavior might be. One has to keep, as it were, one's eye on that to see if you like it. You see, the game of existence is not very simple. If I could say, rely entirely on your feelings, act on impulse, never do anything except what you would really want to do, it isn't, that would be oversimplification. Because among the things that most of us really want to do, there is a certain concession we would like to make to an ideal pattern. So sometimes when a person does do something which is an act of self-sacrifice, or described as such, it really is something he wants to do. Somebody gives away somebody some money. He doesn't do it because this is a sacrifice and in a masochistic spirit, but because, good heavens, I would really like to see what would happen when this guy gets the money. What fun to see this enterprise start, even if I don't get anything back from it. I'll have the entertainment. So, an ideal pattern of how human relations might be is always something to be worked out, thought about, and kept in mind. For we are always possible we might want it that way. But basically, to do what you really want to do is a more secure gamble than pretending all the time about a lot of oughts and shoulds. A friend of mine who was a very brilliant mathematician once told a story that in the beginning of the ages, God was making up a dictionary of all the words that would be used in language. And one day he visited the Archangel Gabriel, and they left the dictionary in the taxi. And while he was talking to Gabriel, the devil got into the taxi and wrote into the dictionary two words, ought and should. Well, as a result then of pretenses, of not being honest about what we want, untold confusion arises. You know the proverb, be very careful of what you desire, you may get it. We live in a culture where almost the whole economy depends upon the creation of artificial desires, upon giving you desires that you might never have had in the ordinary way, and therefore thinking that you want things that simply aren't wantable. A lot of people, for example, when they feel miserable, depressed, simply go out shopping, because somehow purchasing something seems to be a fulfillment of life. I mean, I know a lot of wives whose husbands are engaged in business and leave them alone most of the day. Well, there's nothing to do except they regularly go shopping. They shop every day, as if it was something you had to do every day, like having breakfast. And of course that keeps things buzzing and keeps the economy going. But it means that you misinterpret your own feelings. And so there's always, after a shopping spree, a sense of letdown. Same thing happens every Christmas Day with children. You know, the toys are increasingly phony. They are a method of propitiating children. I was saying yesterday about the educational system as being a method of preventing children from growing up too fast so that they won't come on the labor market in one huge splodge. So in the same way, children who are not allowed to participate in human activities such as cooking and hunting and so on have to be given phony activities. Toy cooking stoves, dolls houses, guns, anything but the real thing, so that they will be kept amused and kept out of the way. Because any real child, you know, likes to play with pots and pans and all the things that the adults use and are doing. But toys prevent them from doing that. Now then, what happens is that the children are given an immense artificial desire for toys. A toy shop seems paradise. But when on Christmas Day, the beautiful tree and all the tinsel and all the stuff and packages wonderfully wrapped, you know, the wrappings are better than the contents. More beautiful. They get all these things out and the room is strewn with guns and buses and dolls and all that stuff. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon they are screaming frantic, because actually the whole thing was a terrible letdown. And that happens again and again. But that happens to the adults, you see. The adults are merely repeating for the children what they're doing. They're acquiring all this kind of pretentious junk and thinking that's the answer, and it's a letdown. Because they didn't find out that they don't really want it, and they don't find out what they do really want. Because everybody has to pretend that it's good
to work for what you don't want. So that's the initial difficulty. That is the mere guardian dog at the gate on this path. You see? But so, just simply an initial step here is to be honest with yourself and to be unashamedly egotistic. See, I like people who, supposing they have a certain accomplishment, don't be blushing violets about it, but say, I can do this. I know how to do it, and I do it well, and I can exact, therefore, a fair price for it. I feel happy with a person like that, especially if he's someone, say, like a doctor. I sure want to know that he's good at his job. And if he's confident about it like that and says, yes, I know what to do, then I have that essential faith in him, which everybody has to have in their doctor in order to be healed. But we say, the community says to a person who does that, you are immodest. You are too big for your boots. You've got a swell head. Now, a person has a swell head when his opinion of his accomplishments is excessive. But when a person's accomplishments are good, he ought to be proud of them and be delighted that he can do it so well. Everybody, if you can dance well, don't you love to do it? Are you a show-off? Yes, you are a show-off, but beautiful. Show off, please. We like to see it. This is part of the reason, too, why we all go around in drab colors. Mustn't show off. Mustn't be too conspicuous. Get a kind of a clergy look to you. Modest.